Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, September the 15th, 2021. I wanted to start off today by talking about America's public schools and white supremacy. So practically every habit that exists that is traditional in the United States is now excoriated as white supremacy. So what are the practical effects of this? Well, they are many and various, but one of them is that apparently the American public school system must be destroyed. And here's a story from the Daily Mail by Brian Stieglitz that explains. A Virginia high school teacher has sparked outrage on social media after posting a TikTok video in which he argues that expecting students to behave, follow directions, and sit quietly is the definition of white supremacy. Yeah, it is the very definition of white supremacy. And PBIS is white supremacy with a hug, says this teacher. And what is PBIS? It is positive behavior interventions and supports. According to Wikipedia, PBIS is a set of ideas and tools that schools use to improve the behavior of students. PBIS uses evidence and data-based programs, practices, and strategies to frame behavioral improvement in terms of student growth in academic performance, safety, behavior, and establishing and maintaining positive school culture. PBIS addresses the needs of at-risk students, as well as the multi-leveled needs of all students in regards to behavior, which creates an environment for both teaching and learning to occur in schools. The approach is believed by researchers such as Robert H. Horner to enhance the school staff's time for delivering effective instructions and lessons to all students. In contrast to PBIS, many schools used exclusionary discipline practices, including detentions, suspensions, or expulsions, to separate students from the classroom and from peers. PBIS emphasizes preventing problem behaviors before they happen to increase the opportunity for students to learn by keeping them in the classroom. PBIS is a team-based framework for schools that borrows elements from response to intervention, an intervention that uses diagnostic data to develop personalized learning plans for all students. Well, you see, it's obvious how PBIS and why it came about, because too many Black students were getting detentions, suspensions, or expulsions. And so, yes, move to the hug approach. And let's see, effective classroom management and discipline are essential for teaching and learning. Yes, indeed, they are. PBIS emphasizes the integrated use of classroom management and school-wide discipline strategies, coupled with effective academic instruction to create a positive and safe school climate for all students. PBIS is not a packaged program for districts to purchase. Instead, it is a framework approach that helps schools to identify the key tasks in developing preventative positive behavior tailored to their own school. It is an approach defined by the following core design components. Outcomes. The outcome is the goal for improved student behavior towards which the school community aims. The goals must be measurable and must clearly be the result of implementing the PBIS model. Outcomes of a successful PBIS framework with a school can be measured in both behavior data and academic achievement of the students in the school. The academic and behavior goals are often defined and supported by the students, families, and teachers in tandem for the program to succeed. Data. PBIS is grounded in the data being used for all levels of decision-making. The team often considers trends in numbers, locations of where problems occurred, which classes they occurred in, and individual students that were involved. Practices. This component refers to the evidence-based curriculum, instruction, interventions, and strategies implemented within the school and are meant to create a common and shared understanding of expectations. These practices are introduced through the team after a review of the data. Systems. PBIS requires a review team of educators with buy-in from across the school and strong administrative support to design and enforce the PBIS system. The team is generally a representative group of all the staff, classroom teachers, special education teachers, specialists, etc. In a secondary school, students could also be included as part of this team. The team creates the systems used by the remainder of the staff and the students they serve. The core principles of PBIS at the primary level are: 1, schools can effectively teach appropriate behavior to all students. 2, intervene early. 3, use a multi-tier model. 4, use research-based interventions. 5, monitor student progress often. 6, use data to make decisions. 7, use assessments to screen, diagnose, and monitor progress. But you can see that any attempt to regulate behavior is again going to be seen as racist. And I'll get back to this TikTok video shortly. According to the Wikipedia article, alternatives to PBS, culturally responsive PBIS, or CR-PBIS, is also a framework aimed at restructuring school culture, much like PBIS. However, CR-PBIS emphasizes change through understanding and interacting with the community, providing an environment in which all cultures are acknowledged, respected, and celebrated. Is important in building the bridge between home culture and school culture to ensure all students succeed. An understanding of their various cultural beliefs and practices are a must. When someone engages in culturally responsive practice, they are forming an understanding about the values, beliefs, and behaviors of other people than themselves. Race has been a predictor of success in schools for decades. Students of color have statistically lower rates of success, not Asian students. Part of the job of educators is to help bridge the social understanding gap in order to bridge the educational understanding gap. Because of this, there is some concern that PBIS alone creates outcome disparities due to culture. The behavior of students with color, without the acknowledgement of the community they come from, may be seen as disruptive, resistant, and limiting to student success. CR-PBIS tries to address these concerns that are left untouched by the traditional PBIS framework by including families as a large part of creating an environment for teaching and learning. On Friday on the book club, I'm going to be discussing a book by UCLA anthropologist Robert Edgerton called Six Societies, which is an attack on cultural relativism. We can see that PBIS itself is cultural relativism, a rather mild-mannered form of it, whereas culturally responsive PBIS is cultural relativism with a vengeance. But back to the video. Josh Thompson, an English teacher at Blacksburg's High School in Montgomery County, specifically referred to his district's use of positive behavioral interventions and supports, a model educators use to keep students focused and respectful in school. It is not clear how parents or students at the school are reacting to Thompson's video or if they've seen it, but many Twitter users are asking that the district address it, and that some have even demanded he be fired. And watching the video, I'm just wondering, is it now required that elementary school teachers, the male ones in America, must be homosexuals? It certainly seems that way. In the since deleted video, which was originally posted in May, Thompson says, I stated that PBIS is white supremacy with a hug and a lot of y'all. This is a white man speaking, a very white man. Wanted to know more about that. So if PBIS concerns itself with positive behaviors, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what are those positive behaviors? And it's things like making sure you're following directions and making sure that you're sitting quietly and you're in your seat and all of the things that come from white culture. He adds the idea of just sitting quiet and being told stuff and taking things in a passive stance is not a thing that's in many cultures. So if we're positively enforcing these behaviors, we are by extension positively enforcing elements of white culture, which therefore keeps whiteness at the center, which is the definition of white supremacy. Okay. Thompson's TikTok and Twitter accounts have been set to private, and the original TikTok has been taken down, but not before it was shared on the Twitter page Libs of TikTok, where it collected 192,000 views. The satirical account, whose bio reads "all things insane and hypocritical," mockingly shares various TikTok videos from left-leaning users. It posted 2 of Thompson's other TikTok clips, which have since received 23,000 and 18,000 views. The Montgomery County School District said that they support Thompson's right to free speech, but asserted that his views are not their own and defended their use of PBIS. District officials told Fox News that, quote, "A teacher is entitled to their personal belief regarding any division program. The statements made by this teacher do not reflect our PBIS program or the behavioral expectations that we have of students in our schools." It doesn't reflect them. So sitting quietly and being told stuff and taking things in does not reflect, apparently, the practice of the Montgomery County School District, which is good to know for any parents who are thinking of enrolling their children in this school district. We are told that Black students have different ways of learning, different from white students. If this is the case, I do not see how Black students and white students can be educated together in the same classroom. What, we're going to have 2 teachers? Are we going to have a partition? Are we going to bring back segregation within the classroom, within the school, within the school district? Also, if Black students have different behavioral expectations, that is to say, sitting quietly and taking stuff in is not part of their behavioral praxis. Once again, it's difficult to see how Black students and white students can attend the same schools. Because if the rule in the classroom is not sit down, sit still, and shut up, there is very little that will be learned in that classroom. You've all seen YouTube videos of majority Black schools, and a great many of them, most of them, seem to be anarchy, chaos. There is no learning that can be done in such an environment, and as a result, we see, for instance, I believe in the city of Detroit, close to half the students in Detroit leave school functionally illiterate. Now, the Obama administration issued instructions to all schools in America that there was disparate impact in terms of how many Black students were being punished compared to white students, and this had to end immediately. And of course, what this means is continuing white flight from the public school system. Let's look at the numbers here. This is from the National Center for Education Statistics. Between fall 2009 and fall 2018, the percentage of public school students who were Hispanic increased from 22 to 27%. The percentage of public school students who were white decreased from 54 to 47%, and the percentage of students who were Black decreased from 17 to 15%. I've been told that homeschooling is quite significant in the Black community, I suppose because some Black parents have realized that their schools have become anarchic, chaotic, and nothing can be learned there. So Black parents as well, have abandoned the public school system. Now, of course, America is still majority white, depending on how you define white. It's probably in the low 60s. But again, by 2018, the percentage of public school students who are white had decreased from 54 to 47%. This is from Public School Review. White students are now the minority in U.S. public schools. Increasing birth rates among immigrant families from Asia and Central and South America, combined with lower birth rates among white families, means that for the first time in history, public school students in the United States are majority minority. This shift in demographics poses difficulties for schools as they work to accommodate children of varying language abilities and socioeconomic backgrounds. Well, yes, that's another huge problem for public schools, that if they're filling up with students from Mexico and Central America who do not speak English, and a significant amount of whom do not even speak Spanish, it's going to be difficult to have these students in the same classroom as Native Americans. Very difficult indeed. And how much is going to be learned in those classrooms? Well, I don't know whether the educators, as we're supposed to call them these days, really care about that much anymore, because the purpose of public schools in the United States seems to be the inculcation of certain values regarding multiculturalism, diversity, white supremacy, critical race theory, and the like. Let's look at California here. The percentage share of students enrolled in K-12 public schools in 1918 by ethnicity and state: California, white, 22.9%. What that tells me is that they've given up. White people in California have largely given up on public schools. In the District of Columbia, which is now about 50% white, percentage of white students there, 11.9%. Whereas in Idaho, it is 75%. Let's look at New York City. This is from New York City Council. After the landmark 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision, integrating public schools became a nationwide objective. However, New York City public schools remain some of the most segregated in the country. In New York City public schools, 74.6% of Black and Hispanic students attend a school with less than 10% white students. Additionally, 34.3% of white students attend a school with more than 50% white students. Making sure our city's schools reflect the diversity of its residents is a top priority. That's not exactly what they mean, because obviously New York City schools, even the so-called segregated ones, are plenty diverse already. But no, what they're looking for is schools that reflect pretty much exactly the ethnic breakdown of neighborhoods. According to New York City Council, the majority of New York City public school students are Black or Hispanic. It's important to note that 32.1% of New York City's population identifies as white and non-Hispanic, while only 15% of public school students are identified as white by the Department of Education. Let's look at Seattle, which some people call a white-topia. As of 2010, the last census which has been reported, non-Hispanic whites in Seattle were 66.3%. However, the makeup of the schools there, public schools, only 47% white. Let's look at Chicago, and let's look at the numbers for that. In Chicago, well, whites have pretty much, they fled, they're gone. Student racial makeup: African American 35.8, Asian 4.3, Hawaiian Pacific Islander 0.2, Hispanic 46.7, white 10.9%. Just under 11%, and the percentage of non-Hispanic white people in population was 31.7%. So we have seen what has gone on here, that attempts to make public schools, how would you say, culturally diverse, has driven out white students. So what to do? Well, we've already seen in New York City a very determined attempt to destroy the so-called schools of excellence, or whatever you call them, the schools for extra brainy students. That Blacks complain that there's not very many Blacks in them, and that the percentage of students in these schools must reflect the numbers on the ground which obviously would mean that these wouldn't be special schools anymore. So what are white parents doing? Well, they're either homeschooling their children or they're sending them to private schools, which are expensive. I mean, even Catholic private schools are expensive. And I think we can expect to see a determined attempt to destroy private schools by, again, using the hammer of disparate impact to say that, whoa, this school here is 75% white in a city that is only 35% white. This must change. So either, we mean fewer white students and more black students. Kick out white students and bring in black students. What if their families can't afford to pay? Well, the schools can pay. Or perhaps the cities involved can simply expropriate the schools and make them part of the public system. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Seraphim Goose, Red Sulfur, Anrun Adan, Buddy, who says obligatory Linda Carter salutary respect goes here. Hello to William Hicks. Buddy says, Kevin, your new avatar brings out your best personality traits quite nicely. It's not very attractive, but I'm not, at my age and physical condition, I'm not a particularly attractive person anymore. Hello to Steve and Chogokin 666. Quacho Longo. Hauper, the white cables, they're gone. Yes. After, 7 months or so? 6 months? I managed to hide them successfully. Steve says there should be a 2-track school, one for the few that will benefit from schooling and the other for the majority unreachable rabble to be warehoused until they are unleashed on society at 18. Well, Britain had the 11 plus exams, which used to exist in Ontario as well. 2 streams were created in grade 5, the age of 11. Obviously, first 5 years of school, kindergarten are important. And again, in any school where the rule is not enforced, sit down, sit still, and shut up, there is not going to be any learning done. Oh, yes. More talk about the cables. Chogokin 666 is a good indicator, not hitting your diminutive Asian teacher over the head with a chair for breaking up a fight. Quachalango says perhaps KMG was visited by a maid. No such luck. And William Hicks says knowing how to be on time, give a good faith effort, and show consideration for others are classic white racist values. A great recipe for being able to hold down a job also. 7 Costanza says, KMG, do you think All the King's Men is worth reading? What's that, Robert Penn Warren? I've never read it. I've only seen the movie. Who else do we have here? Hello to Thomas Henderson. It's a new name to me. No Sleep Till Breezewood PA says, the clips that libs of TikTok share actually infuriate me. Those people are too far gone to even laugh at. They've probably already screwed up people around them and will continue to do so. I try not to even follow libs of TikTok, but it seems there is new insanity that other posters are drawn to comment on. And anyone else in the chat? We're getting to the end here. Okay. Disparate impact is a terrible doctrine, Steve. Yes. I think for the United States to survive, to survive as a viable culture, disparate impact needs to be extirpated. You look great, green screen printed on my mud flap, says Quachulango. Metal Mike says, what do you think of Jugmeat throwing his candidates under the bus? Well, I'm really not surprised, although it seems rather unfair for someone to be bounced because of a comment that he made when he was 16 years old. Texas Feral Hog says, disparate impact must go. It's beyond me the Federalist Society hasn't focused on overturning Briggs versus Duke power. Texas Feral Hog says, it's all based on the suppression of scientific truth of differing aptitude and behavior averages between differing populations. Metal Mike says, yes, but he's now 18 years old. Oh, is the NDP still doing that? Still nominating 18-year-old candidates? Okay, then. Well, yeah. Let's hear from a different Black voice. This is in the American Mind. American, Black, and proud, African Americans are under no obligation to renounce their Black identity. The following essay is a direct response to Jason Hill's Freedom from Blackness, and thus initiates a conversation in these pages among independent Black thinkers of the question of African American identity. More items forthcoming. Lester Cahill is described as an essayist. His Twitter handle is Lester of Compton. He begins, I reject the terms of surrender offered by Jason Hill in his essay Freedom from Blackness, recently published in the American Mind, in which he demands that Blacks renounce their racial identity and become a psychologically raceless people and open ourselves to the luminous potential of man and a new birth to the Black individual as an individual. I'm not renouncing a damned thing about my life and heritage in the United States. Professor Hill calls on Black Americans to empty themselves of any human identification. He supposes this will make us pioneers of a new planetary ethic. This proposal is religious in nature. He wants Blacks to be the new man of the new creation promised in the Christian Bible, but he wants to arrive at that glorified humanity without the second coming of Christ. Hill sounds like St. Paul. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you all one in Christ Jesus. Or to look at it from another perspective, he wants to remake Blacks in the image of Homo Sovieticus, starting over at year one. Hill presents a warped view of Black history and can't imagine why Blacks embrace it. He pretends the only reason Blacks coalesce around a self-hating form of identification, it is a fetishized history. But if Professor Hill weren't in such a rush to bring about the new Eden, he might have examined the motivations of the actual Black leaders who were trying to save a people from an overwhelming flood of hatred. Richard Allen, for instance, a prominent Black leader in the late 18th century and founder of the American Methodist Episcopal Church, said, what knits the cause of Blacks from the prosperous and educated to the poor and discarded is the bond of suffering and wrong. Hill's polemic is also flawed for what it omits. Black Americans have no tribal affiliation. We're not Maasai, Yoruba, or Zulu. We assume whatever political moniker is affixed to us, from colored to Negro to African American, but we are Americans foremost. Certainly the rest of the world sees us as Americans. The Black soldiers I know who served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan can reliably report that when the bullets were flying on the battlefield, the jihadis aiming the AK-47s their way certainly thought of them as American. Even wrong-headed and easily manipulated Black athletes from John Carlos and Tommy Smith to Colin Kaepernick, who took a stand against the flag, did so because they wanted more of what they conceived to be America, not more of what they conceive of as being Black. American citizenship is our birthright. It rightly offends us when we think it is being denied. Throw away our particular American Blackness and you throw away what makes us exceptional. It is odd that Professor Hill made no mention of the very real amor patria Black Americans possess. I'm not, Lester Cahill sounds like a good man, but I don't know that I agree with him. Now, I suppose if you were to canvass ordinary Black people, that is to say non-elite, they would be liable to agree with him. But as far as the American Black elite goes, and mulatto elite for that matter, Americanness has been decisively rejected. They do not consider themselves Americans. They consider themselves to be Black first, foremost, and perhaps only. And oh, yes. And of course, we know that Black people have to be progressive, they have to be left wing, they have to be democratic. Here's another example of this prejudice. This is from Deborah Heine at American Greatness. Former Detroit Police Chief James Craig, 65, tried to hold a press conference in a state park Tuesday to announce his candidacy for governor of Michigan, but had to cut it short when a mob of aggressive left-wing agitators prevented him from speaking. As soon as he reached the podium at Belle Isle Park to make his announcement, the political newcomer was swarmed by dozens of leftists who blasted air horns, raised their fists, flipped the bird, and screamed, "Hey, hey, hey, ho, James Craig has got to go." Agitators from Detroit Will Breathe held signs that read, "Racist ass Republican Craig. James Craig gives Nazis guided tours," and "Defund DPD," which is the Detroit Police Department. As the mob of mostly white activists pressed in on the candidate from all sides, his staff formed a human shield around him, and local media reporters thrust their microphones up to his face so he could be heard above the din. Still, it was impossible to hear the candidate speak. One particularly menacing agitator was able to get disturbingly close to the Black Republican, pointing angrily at him, shoving a staffer, and shouting profanities. And I think I'll let that pass. Oh, it's not coming directly for me. The Black experience in Canada, apparently it's an entirely ugly experience if the media is to be trusted. I'll point out again that as of the 1971 census, there were 34,400 Blacks in the whole of Canada, a country that had 22 million people at the time. The Black experience is, until quite recently, simply vestigial to Canadian history and culture. Large numbers of Blacks have come to Canada from the 1970s onwards, from Jamaica, Haiti, and now increasingly from Africa. And they don't seem to like the place very much. A typical example is Erica Ifill, who is a Black agitator. Oh, and she's a co-host of the Bad and Bitchy podcast. She writes in the Hill Times, "Canada isn't ready for what comes next. We're coming down the home stretch of this god-awful election, and evidently the PPC, that's the People's Party of Canada, aren't the only ones with white male rage. Erin O'Toole and Justin Trudeau have turned particularly nasty as both the gloves and the masks come off. This election has been particularly silent on intersectional feminist issues. There has been little to no talk about systemic racism, the crisis of sexual violence, homelessness. Yes, we've talked affordable housing to death, but not homelessness, sexual harassment at work, or the rising threat of white supremacy. These issues are at the boiling point, especially the rising threat of white supremacy." That's a little awkward, that repetition. "And nearly everyone in mainstream media is ignoring it. Canada is about to get violent." Sounds like she's looking forward to it. "And we are not prepared for the extent of the threat, even though we've been aware of it since 2017 with the Quebec City mosque shootings." Note the lack of inclusion of any of the examples, and there are quite a few in Canada, of radical Muslims killing Canadians for religious reasons. She continues, "The anxiety of the pandemic, increased time spent online, and a former American president that platformed hate are all ingredients to a cauldron of white supremacy," a cauldron which she'd already told us was boiling over. Again, awkward repetition. "The Institute of Strategic Dialogue," yes, what do you know? An NGO that you've never heard of, and quite possibly an AstroTurf organization, although I can't state that definitely, issued a report this summer, an online environmental scan of right-wing extremism Canada, which tracks the online ecosystems used by RWEs in Canada. This should be a horrifying journey. No, that's actually in her story, that sentence. The report notes a number of disturbing trends online. RWEs are drivers of disinformation campaigns. They are impervious to social media enforcement. You mean, so when they're kicked off Twitter, Facebook, etc., they're still impervious to social media enforcement. And ISD observed a small number of posts involving hateful and violent mobilization across the channels. Yeah, a small number of posts. It doesn't sound like a crisis to me. And this is the point, Erica, I feel, instructs us. Hate doesn't stay bottled up. It's explosive. I thought it was a cauldron that was boiling over and reveals itself in giant waves of overwhelming violence. You mean like a cauldron overflowing? Before the recipients or observers of that violence can absorb what is happening. And it's exploding. Yes, your mixed metaphor disaster is exploding, Erica, I feel. Mark Douglas from 680 News tweeted September 13th, ahead of an anti-mandate demonstration outside Toronto General Hospital this afternoon, coordinated with similar events at hospitals across Canada, a group of first responders against vaccine mandates stages a silent protest in front of Queen's Park. The tweet includes video of mostly white people. Boo! White people, don't you just hate them? Staging a silent protest, standing in a line with their arms linked with a placard that reads, Frontline for Freedom of Choice. This had to be one of the most disturbing scenes I had seen over the election. The calm of their stance betrays their capacity for violence. Sure it does. And given that we're having a gun debate of some sort, it's important to note how much gender violence and white supremacy are intertwined. And gender violence has exactly what to do with anti-mandate protests. An awful lot of women at these protests, you may have noticed. The People's Party of Canada is surging. CBC News reports PPC leader Maxime Bernier has gone from leading a small fringe group with tepid support to heading up a right-wing party that, according to CBC Poll Tracker, could have the fourth highest share of the vote on September 20th. That should scare everyone, but it doesn't. The people who are the most fearful are racialized. Yes, and who racialized you? And how? The only people fearful are racialized. These votes can come from only one source, so look for the Conservatives to activate their racist dog whistles. That's just loopy. It's loopy and it makes no sense. We are in a 2016 US election loop, and that's why I hate election 44 so much. Trudeau is Hillary Clinton, Bernier is Trump, and Jody Wilson-Raybould is Clinton's emails. The vitriol is rising. The deplorables are increasing their threats of violence. It's only a matter of time before we get our own tiki torch moment, which could be in the form of a boiling cauldron, which is overflowing. And to add insult to injury, media establishment pundits are calling for the platforming of Bernier, arguing why he should be in the debates. That is how media legitimizes and normalizes hate. But then this is also a news media who praises all white panels a year after they presented their offerings to the altar of diversity and inclusion. Though Bernier won't win, he will make a significant advancement that will shock an impotent Canadian news media establishment that should have been tracking these movements all along. Remember that wave I talked about? You mean the cauldron that's boiling and overflowing? It's coming. Paranoia. Absolute paranoia. So I'm going to look at the chat. True Greenberg said, hate doesn't just manifest for no reason. There are always reasons for hate, and sometimes there are very good reasons. Red Sulfur says the low will always hate the high. No Sleep Till Breezewood PA says, as I said earlier, the narrative is like you uploaded Philip Roth into an AI, but the computer was already breaking down to crank up the neurosis. Texas Feral Hog says, we've been open and better behaved than one could ever hope, yet they, the elite, continue to kick us in the teeth with lies, stripping away our rights and dehumanization. Buddy says a popular amusement park recently had major problems with youths terrorizing normal park goers. They instituted an adult chaperone policy. Problem was solved. Steve says, this is some crappy writing. Indeed. Quachilango says, heard today they are not letting vehicles older than 2011 into some national parks. Not sure what to do with my hundreds, thousands of miles airstream. Again, from Texas Feral Hog, to identify as differing racial ethnic means that you treat the other differently. It's tautology. Was hiking in a state park today, says True Greenberg, ran across two groups of black people. One group stunk of weed and the both were blasting music. There is no escape from them. Don Willis says most Americans are sick and tired of a government that is bloated and unresponsive to their plight. They're happy to store up ammo, food, and wait for the war cry. Did Celine ever go to Canada, says Quachalango? I believe he did, actually. I know for certain that he was in Detroit and studied Ford factory at, what do they call it? River Rouge River, whatever, for the World Health Organization, or the League of Nations, actually. Okay. The other candidate said Kushner stole vaccines and shipped them to Israel, LOL, says Metal Mike. Okay. Strange obsession with Jared Kushner. Oh, yes, and let's talk more about Maxime Bernier. This is from Gary Mason, who is the national affairs columnist at the Globe and Mail. Election campaigns are bruising. Okay. Generally thankless affairs. I have no idea what he means to say. Generally thankless affairs. Not thankless for the candidates that win. Not thankless for the party which gets the most seats, which forms the government. Not thankless at all. In which the mood of the candidates is inextricably linked to the proximity of the finish line. That is just terrible writing. Again, it makes no sense. That is, unless you have nothing to lose, then you can often enjoy the experience and get more exposure than you ever imagined or frankly deserved. Again, what are you on about? Welcome to Mad Max Bernier's world. Bernier leads the People's Party of Canada. This is his second federal campaign as frontman of a political entity he founded in the wake of a failed bid for the leadership of the Conservative Party in 2017. The pandemic has not been good for much, except perhaps Bernier's political fortunes. It's not the kind of bump with which most people would be happy to be associated, but then beggars can't be choosers. Would you speak that way about the Green Party? The PPC is getting 2 to 3 times as many votes in the polls as the Green Party, but let's hear more about the agony of Annemie Paul. Many of the deplorable anti-vaxxers who've been protesting outside hospitals and angrily confronting Liberal leader Justin Trudeau on the campaign trail have found a home in the PPC. A former PPC riding president was recently charged with assault with a weapon after allegedly pelting Trudeau with gravel at a campaign event. They have been drawn to the party's emphasis on freedom and liberty, and its government have no right to tell us what to do. Credo. A passionate, if not flaky, libertarian, Bernier is capitalizing on the intersection of a pandemic and a federal election. Oh, something is happening in the world, something important while happening in Canada, and it's become an issue in the election. Golly, that's never happened before. His party has given voice to those who believe vaccine mandates and passports are an infringement of their constitutional rights. Prior to now, Bernier and his party have mostly been an easily ignored sideshow. His questioning of human-caused climate change and his horrible mocking of climate campaigner Greta Thunberg were enough to make most normal-thinking people tune the party out long ago. The sketchy nationalists, the PPC seem to attract more concern, but not any threat to our security. If he wanted to hold meetings and quote Ayn Rand, fine. If he wanted to be an outlet for the country's conspiracy theories, okay. But what he's doing on the campaign trail is not kosher, not by any measure. Bernier recently wrapped up the 3-day tour of Alberta, where, according to polls, the PPC enjoys more support than almost anywhere else in the country. He held a few well-attended events, including at a church at Spruce Grove, just outside Edmonton. Hundreds, virtually all without masks, crammed inside the church hall to hear Bernier ramble on about how horrible it is that governments are using the pandemic as an excuse to restrict people's rights. Because we know that without freedom, there's no human dignity, equality of rights, and economic prosperity, he told his audience. We know that freedom is the foundation of our Western civilization. He pulled out a quote he uses often: when tyranny becomes law, revolution becomes our duty. It's a line familiar to many far-right militia organizations. Here's the biggest problem. Bernier is giving cover to all those out there who are refusing to get vaccinated, not because of some underlying condition, but because they simply don't want to. This phenomenon is stalling our pandemic recovery. Oh, is that the causality here? Is it? Alberta, for instance, is in a crisis with hospitals overrun with COVID-19. The province's intensive care units are now treating a record number of patients sick with the virus, the vast majority of whom were not vaccinated. Imagine. So the number of people vaccinated grows and grows and grows and grows, and yet we have this wave, this Delta wave. What does that tell you, Gary Mason? No, you're too thick to make the connection. Meanwhile, Bernier is out there promoting the kind of nonsense that is fueling anti-vaxxer rage and making the jobs of governments trying to tame the fourth wave that much harder. This will be the PPC leader's greatest legacy and his greatest shame. There's no question he's sucking some support away from his old party in this election. It remains to be seen, however, if it will be enough to cost the CPC a shot at government. Regardless of when the story of this election is written, Bernier will remain a historical footnote, and a disgraceful one at that. Yes, how dare a Canadian party leader actually have differences of opinions from every other party leader? That is simply not the Canadian way. Certainly not the Globe and Mail way. Brendan O'Neill writes at Spiked Online, where's the outrage over a mainstream broadcaster giving a platform to a former follower of a fascistic death cult? That happened today on Good Morning Britain when Susanna Reid and Richard Madley had an early morning chat with Shamina Begum, the young British woman who ran off to join ISIS in 2015 and who stayed with it as it enslaved Yazidi women, slaughtered Christians, executed homosexuals, and instigated acts of barbarism against men, women, and children in Paris, Barcelona, Manchester, and elsewhere in Europe. The no platform lobby has been strangely silent. This is odd to say the least, because these people normally never pipe down about bad people being platformed. Sunita Gupta only has to utter the words "good morning" during appearance on the Today Show, and instantly an online mob forms chastising the Bee for giving airtime for a woman who was wrong about the IFR of COVID. If a climate change skeptic wonders out loud if we might, in fact, have a little more than 10 years to save the planet, there will be ceaseless online petitioning demanding that his foul views never be allowed to sully the airwaves again. As for feminists who think only men have penises, apparently having these heretics, these witches on TV is tantamount to genocide against trans people. Cast them out. This woman has, she's got a makeover. The glow up referred to in that creepy Standard piece, the Evening Standard that is Shamima's latest makeover. The black chador is gone, and now Begum is sporting a Nike cap, flowing brown locks, and painted nails. From Islam to glam, as a tabloid headline might put it. What's next? A stint on Love Island? Surely it won't be long before there's a podcast chat with Novara Media. If Shamima were to return to the UK, there would unquestionably be more media splashes, maybe a book deal, definitely tear-stained Guardian articles about this bright East London student who was groomed by male fanatics. And anyone who says "you what" will instantly be denounced as gammon low life. He calls her a traitor, which is what she is, but she was just a widow girl. So, being female, she can't be held responsible for her actions. Oh, I'm going to have to talk about this dreadful, dreadful couple, Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz. This is from a bunch of stories from the Mail, which went spare on this. This is by Martin Robinson. Harry and Meghan are named on Time magazine's list of the world's 100 most influential people, alongside fellow icons Dolly Parton and Naomi Osaka. Dolly Parton is influential? How exactly is she influential? Her music might have been influential, I don't know, back in the 1970s or 80s, perhaps. She's famous, still alive. Is that all it takes to be considered influential? I suppose that Naomi Osaka is genuinely influential and that she has influenced a generation of young women to conclude that when the going gets tough, just quit. Very influential indeed. U.S. publication released a glossy and heavily airbrushed cover image of couple in Montecito mansion. Critics claim it shows Meghan is in charge. Time insists portrait shows powerful dynamic as equal partners. close friend wrote profile declaring couple are blessed through birth and talent and burned by fame. Yes, fame it's just been such a curse to them. That's why they flee from fame as a vampire does from a cross. Chef Jose Andres said, the Duke and Duchess have compassion for the people they don't know. Okay, if you say so. And apparently they're just a wonder. They are an absolute wonder. One commenter said the photo looks photoshopped. Also, the way they are positioned is very revealing. It's the Meghan show, and Harry is just the supporting actor. One critic said Harry looks completely awkward, peering behind his wife like this. Actress Kate Winslet, who is often regarded by film critics as one of the preeminent actresses of her generation, and the Ugandan British actor Daniel Kaluuya, who portrayed Posh Kenneth in the first 2 seasons of the British television series Skins, are the 2 other Britons named on this year's list. Kate Winslet, how exactly is Kate Winslet influential? Who is she influencing? And in what way is she influencing them? Oh, Dr. Ngonjo Iweala is praised by Harry and Meghan for the groundbreaking nature of her appointment to the role as Director General of the World Trade Organization. I very much doubt that either Harry or Meghan Mertz had even heard of the World Trade Organization before the groundbreaking appointment of Dr. Ngozi was made known to them. Who else is on this list? Britney Spears. Yeah, I suppose she can be considered influential in the sense that she has influenced women to stay out of the music business. Dolly Parton, yeah, we talked about her. Kathy Park Hong, a poet who has published 3 volumes focusing on mixed language. People don't read poetry anymore. Human rights activists, Asian hate speech. Billie Eilish, yeah, maybe she's influential. Ben Crump, the lawyer, yes. The ambulance chaser, yes, perhaps. Aurora James, founder of the fashion label Brother Vellies. Yes, it is this person who designed the Tax the Rich dress that Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez was wearing at the Met Gala. So let's have a quick run through of Meghan and Harry. That their popularity has collapsed in Britain. I believe something only like about 25%, according to polls, regard them favorably. But, Time Magazine is always doing this. Here's a list of, 20, 50, 100 influential people. Being famous does not equal being influential. This is again from the Mail. Twitter users are mocking Harry and Meghan's awkward and airbrushed Time Magazine cover, with people saying their friends' gushing tribute about the couple's struggle makes them want to vomit after making the 2021 list of 100 most influential people on the planet. What was the particular quote that I saw? Yes. Oh, this is from Chef Jose Andres. In a world where everyone has an opinion about people they don't know, the Duke and Duchess have compassion for the people they don't know. They don't just opine, they run toward the struggle. Yes, definitely nominated for Sood's Corner. And Meghan Markle struck a wide-legged pose for Time cover to show herself as powerful, while Harry, standing behind, was forced to lean into his wife, body language expert reveals. Does anyone doubt that Meghan is the one who wears the pants in that family? In these pictures, literally wearing pants. And she's definitely a populist figure, a woman of the people. Again, from the Mail, Meghan Mertz models $384,000 jewelry collection on Time's most influential people cover From Princess Diana's $23,000 Cartier tank watch to a $1,050 diamond pinky promise rings, which represent female empowerment. Well, I suppose diamonds have always, in a way, represented female empowerment. Wouldn't you agree? Hang on. So let me refresh this. Okay. I had a fear that my Twitter had stopped working for some reason. Yes, as Alex Berenson says, the beatings will continue until morale improves. So there's 2 posts up on his Substack today. Are you kidding me, Pfizer? Is the latest. The FDA just released its briefing book for Pfizer's request for a 3rd dose of Comirnaty. Or is that BNT 162b2? No matter, it's approved either way, sorta. It is every bit the mess we all expected. Let's go to the highlights. Pfizer basically hasn't bothered to test the booster at all in the people actually at risk. It conducted a single phase 1 trial that covered 12 people over 65. The main phase 2/3 booster trial, there were efforts to cover multiple phases of drug research at once. You want it bad, you get it bad, included no one over 55. No one, as in none. Which makes total sense. Why test the booster in people who actually need it because they're at high risk from the row? Nothing good can come of that. So that's our trial design. Now, safety. Of the 300 people who received the booster, 1 had a heart attack 2 months later. No worries, Pfizer concluded it wasn't related. Yay. 5% of recipients had enlarged lymph nodes. What about effectiveness? Well, we don't have enough data, or any data really, telling us how well the booster will work. But the FDA made Pfizer go back and review its data from the pivotal clinical trial from last year. Pfizer compared people who received the vaccine with those who received the placebo and then the vaccine, the best we can do at this point, since Pfizer blew up the trial by giving placebo subjects the vaccine double yay. Pfizer concluded that your annual risk of getting COVID-19 if you are vaccinated is about 7%. Further, additional analysis appears to indicate that incidence of COVID-19 generally increased in each group of study participants with increasing time post-dose 2 at the start of the analysis period. Oh, don't worry, Uncle Joe has already told you can get your booster on September the 20th. If it's good enough for our fearless leader, it should be good enough for the FDA. Am I right? Science. And here he is from 5 hours ago, the most damning article about vaccines yet. British doctors now openly beg for more lockdowns because they say they can't rely on vaccines. This new piece from Reuters, hardly an outpost of anti-vax fanaticism, should terrify vaccine advocates and honestly scare the rest of us. A reminder, Britain has pursued a mass vaccination strategy as aggressively as any country. It approved Pfizer's vaccine even before the FDA. More than 80% of Britons over 16 are now fully vaccinated. But Britain is in far worse shape than it was at this time last year when no one was vaccinated. It is now averaging about 140 deaths a day, roughly 10 times as many as mid-September 2020. And hospitalizations and deaths continue to rise. But Britain, which had a very strict and economically damaging lockdown last year, has essentially given up on lockdowns and other national control measures over the weekend, or even dropped the plan for a vaccine passport, though it has since backtracked a bit. Now, Reuters reports British physicians are warning the vaccines don't work well enough to allow the country to return to normal. The piece is an unfortunate exercise in unintentional irony, as when it sincerely refers to the success of vaccinations, 2 paragraphs after explaining that, quote, relying largely on vaccines could put unintentional pressure on hospitals, unquote. Imagine how much higher, lower, of course, definitely lower, hospitalizations would be if Britain could just get to 100% vaccinated. And again, yes, the beatings will continue until morale improves. More and more people get vaccinated and more people get infected. Yes. Seems fairly obvious to me. what has happened. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Study shows vaccine will enhance Delta infectivity. A group of Japanese researchers released research showing that the SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant is poised to acquire complete resistance to existing COVID-19 jabs. When 4 common mutations were introduced to the Delta variant, Pfizer's mRNA injection enhanced its infectivity, causing it to become resistant. A Delta variant with 3 mutations has already emerged, which suggests it's only a matter of time before a 4th mutation develops, at which point complete resistance to Pfizer's jab may be imminent. A number of experts have raised concerns that COVID-19 jabs and the mass vaccination program could worsen the pandemic by triggering the development of new variants via a concept known as antigenic or immune escape. Another study found that a worst-case scenario can develop when a large percentage of the population is vaccinated, but viral transmission remains high, driving the development of resistant strains. And, oh, yes, I made a joke for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know, maybe it's not going to be a joke. This is from Connor Boyd at the Mail. Babies could be given Pfizer's COVID vaccine in the U.S. this winter. Company plans to seek approval for jabbing 6-month-olds in November. My joke was that soon these maniacs will be demanding that that children be vaccinated in utero. Who's laughing now? This is from Alistair Steele at the CBC. Disgust growing over vaccine protesters' Holocaust comparisons. Demonstrators seen wearing yellow stars holding pictures of Anne Frank. At the National Holocaust Monument in Ottawa on Tuesday, they gathered to remember the Babi Yar massacre in September 1941, in which nearly 34,000 Jewish men, women, and children were murdered. At the solemn ceremony, which happened the same day provincial officials unveiled details of Ontario's vaccine passport system, there was little sympathy for those who have been protesting against such passports and vaccine mandates, some comparing themselves to victims of Nazi brutality. It's a total desecration of the memory of those that were killed during the Holocaust, said prominent Ottawa lawyer Lawrence Greenspan, who co-chaired Tuesday's commemoration. It's incredibly insulting. At a demonstration in Calgary last week, one protester held a picture of Anne Frank, the teenage diarist who died in a Nazi concentration camp. One internet meme making the rounds shows 2 forearms, one wearing a proof of vaccination bracelet at a baseball game, the other bearing a 6-digit tattoo from a concentration camp. Those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it, the caption reads. There is a picture here of a ceremony at the National Holocaust Monument in Ottawa. I don't know whether I'd ever seen pictures of this structure before, but it is one of the most hideous and depressing things that I have ever seen. It's almost unreal in its ugliness. Let's see more from Greenspan. Now, this is the takeaway here. I really wish there was a way that we could stop it from happening, but I don't think the criminal law is at current equipped to be able to do that. So Greenspan goes into a tizzy because some people are comparing the restrictions on freedom, which we've seen during the COVID-19 hysteria, to what the Nazis did against the Jews. So his response is, these people need to be arrested. Not much self-awareness there from Lawrence Greenspan. Oh, and class sizes. People are moaning in Ontario about class sizes. This is from Jessica Wong at the CBC. A teacher in Montreal arranges desks in late August with the new school year now underway. The debate over the safety of large class sizes has returned amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is like 20 desks in this room. How is that considered to be an overcrowded classroom? But apparently, JS tweets 30 kids in my child's grade 5 class. 5 in a pandemic. with Delta, all unvaccinated kids. This is the largest class my elementary kids have ever been in. Oh dear, just the horror of 30 children in a classroom. It used to be common for 35 to 40 children to be in a classroom. In fact, Richard Vedder, he used to be with Ohio State University. He did a study of this, included there is no evidence whatsoever that smaller class sizes lead to better school outcomes. His own view, based on the data, was 35 was about the best size. And I suspect that might be because the more the number of children in a classroom, the stricter the discipline has to be. Oh my God, we have young people, and they're sitting at a Catholic high school in Ottawa, and there's 5 of them sitting around a table. It's horrifying. It's just the carnage. They're all wearing masks, and masks work, right? Hysteria. Let's go to dailyskeptic.org, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. And Pfizer said, COVID vaccine for babies. Yes, indeed. COVID flip-flopping is cock-up, not conspiracy. This is, Toby Young wrote a piece in the Mail. Oh, Boris Johnson, he just can't be held down to anything. Can't. Health Secretary attempts to outline what could trigger Plan B this winter. Well, the vaccines minister in Britain has been shuffled. I don't know whether that make a difference or not. But no, might be more lockdowns in Britain. And of course, if doctors are demanding lockdowns because the vaccines don't work, then I suppose there are going to be more. There are going to be more lockdowns. Tory MP calls on Chris Whitty to resign after giving green light for vaccination of all healthy teenagers. Scottish teachers did not face an elevated risk of severe COVID-19 when schools were open. And okay, so let us. Okay. Yes. In the anarcho-tyranny file, again from the Mail, U.S. will require all new immigrants applying for permanent residency to be vaccinated against COVID-19 unless you wade across the Rio Grande illegally. Yes, of course, because these people, the 95,000 from Afghanistan, I don't believe that they are being tested as well. I don't suppose that there is much COVID-19 in Afghanistan, but I could be wrong about that. There's not very much vaccination in India, but India is doing far better than the West in terms of the dreaded fourth wave. One could draw a certain conclusion from that, but no, the geniuses who are in charge of our elite are not much cop at causality. In fact, they're worthless at it. Let's go back to Tainter, The Collapse of Complex Societies, which is published by Cambridge University Press in 1988. And we were talking about the study of collapse and the various theories as to what constitutes collapse and what are the reasons for collapse. Yes, and I went through the list of 11. So let's discuss the framework of the discussion. The goal of this study throughout is to understand collapse as a general phenomenon, to gain an understanding not limited to specific cases, but applicable across time, space, and type of society. Most explanations of collapse focus on a particular society or civilization rather than approach the global process. Thus, there are far more explanations of the fall of Rome or of the Maya than there are comparisons of these. Some authors do make comparisons of 2 or 3 cases of collapse, but desist from further generalization. This situation indeed is no more than characteristic of history and the social sciences, which have always been overwhelmingly particularistic. One outcome of explaining individual collapses is that criticisms of these attempts have been primarily factual. While a critique of an author's explanation for the demise of Society X might discuss the logic of the argument, it seems easier for such critics to focus on factual matters, to show that the historical and/or archaeological records of Society X don't fit the proposed explanation. Thus, when scholars postulate climatic deterioration for the fall of the Mycenaean civilization, or invaders for the collapse of the Maya, critics will generally assert that factual evidence for climatic fluctuations or invaders is either lacking or contradictory to the proposal. Subsequent debate tends to turn about the factual contest. There is or is not evidence for the climatic fluctuation for the invaders and the like. Rarely do authors question the logic of the original proposition. How does or how can climatic fluctuations, invaders, and so forth lead to collapse? Can the postulated cause really account for the outcome? Is the explanation adequate? While some critics do raise such questions, this is rarely done on a general basis. The factual debate remains prominent. The premise of the present approach is that if the logic of an argument is faulty, a discussion of factual matters is largely unnecessary. If the climatic shift or the intruders could not have caused the society collapse, then all the evidence for or against these is interesting but immaterial. Hence, in what follows, the major focus will be on the logic of proposed explanations. Factual matters will, from time to time, be discussed, but these are never of major importance. The stimulus to undertake this study was the perception that existing explanations of collapse logically cannot account for it. This chapter will detail the reservations about previous approaches and show where these approaches fail. The tone is necessarily critical, but it is worth noting that for all this, the existing literature does have much to offer in understanding collapse. It simply cannot offer all that might be presently wished. After these pages of skepticism, the chapter will conclude with some hopeful comments. And first explanation, resource depletion. 2 major explanations for collapse are subsumed under this theme: the gradual deterioration or depletion of a resource base, usually agriculture, often due to human mismanagement, and the more rapid loss of resources due to an environmental fluctuation or climatic shift. Both are thought to cause collapse through depletion of the resources on which a complex society depends. Although the causal link from economic deterioration to collapse is a recent theory, the linkage between the two is a source of speculation to many who experienced the Roman breakdown. Among some ancient writers, though, the causal chain was reversed from theories of today. The decline in agricultural yields in Italy in the 1st century BC, for example, was thought by some to be a result of moral decadence. Writers of the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD are often reminiscent of 19th and 20th century climatological theorists, although usually the decline of agriculture and mining was seen as the Romans as a covariable rather than as a cause of political weakness. The world as a whole, to these observers, was aging and losing vigor. The Christian writer Cyprian, 3rd century AD, asserted that the age is now senile. The world itself testifies to its own decline by giving manifold concrete evidences of the process of decay. There is a diminution in the winter rains that give nourishment to the seeds in the earth, and in the summer heats that ripen the harvests. The springs have less freshness, and the autumns less fecundity. The mountains, disemboweled and worn out, yield a lower output of marble. The mines, exhausted, furnish a smaller stock of the precious metals. The veins are impoverished and they shrink daily. There is a decrease and deficiency of farmers in the field, of sailors on the sea, of soldiers in the barracks, of honesty in the marketplace, of justice in court, of concord in friendship, of skill in technique, of strictness in morals. Anything that is near its end and is verging towards its decline and fall is bound to dwindle. This is the sentence that has been passed upon the world. This loss of strength and loss of stature must end at last in annihilation. And this is quoted in Toynbee. The present link between climate and resource depletion and the rise and fall of civilizations owes much to the work of Ellsworth Huntington and to more recent theorists such as Winkleson Browning, J. Hughes, and Butler. Huntington espoused a biological model that few anthropologists today could endorse. Quote, "The nature of a people's culture depends primarily upon racial inheritance," unquote. But beyond biology, Huntington argued that civilization is affected by climate, that many of the great nations of the past rose and fell with favorable and unfavorable climatic conditions. During times of favorable climate in countries such as Egypt and Greece, the people were apparently filled with a virile energy which they do not possess. With aridity in Greece, there came economic distress, famine, and lawlessness. To Huntington, high frequencies of cyclonic storms energized populations to create civilizations, and when a climate became unfit, no people could retain the energy and progressiveness that he believed was necessary for civilization. The fall of Rome was explained by adverse climatic conditions after the early 3rd century AD. Winkleson and Browning provide an updated climatic theory, but with a curious reversal of some Huntington's reasoning. To them, changing physical forces, e.g. increased volcanism, led to changing climates, which led to changing food supplies and thus to changing human behavior, wars, migrations, economic upheavals, changing ethics, etc. Whereas Huntington saw civilizations flourishing in stimulating climates, Winkleson and Browning ascribed civilization to benign climatic conditions and collapse conversely. They suggest that when climate changes, marginal areas are affected first. Buffer states begin to abandon the characteristics of civilization, return to nomadism and raiding, and ultimately topple the weakened centers of power. These authors further postulate an 800-year climatically induced cycle to human affairs superimposed on shorter cyclic patterns. I'll have more from Joseph Tainter tomorrow. And I'm going to talk now about, oh yes, my little pun, Butlerian jihad. And this is in reference to the feminist scholar, if you will, or terror, as others might see her, Judith Butler. According to Wikipedia, Butler was born in 1956. She's an American philosopher and gender theorist who worked as influenced political philosophy, ethics, and the fields of third wave feminism, queer theory, and literary theory. And there's a very, very long entry on her because she is just so gosh darn important. One of my favorite bits was Avital Ronell sexual harassment case. On May 11, 2018, Butler led a group of scholars in writing a letter to New York University following the sexual harassment suit filed by former NYU graduate student against his advisor, Avital Ronell. The signatories acknowledged not having had access to the confidential findings of the investigation that followed the Title IX complaint against Ronell. Nonetheless, they accused the complainant of waging a malicious campaign against Ronell. The signatories also wrote that the presumed malicious intention has animated and sustained this legal nightmare for a highly regarded scholar. If she were to be terminated or relieved of her duties, the injustice would be widely recognized and opposed. Butler, the chief signatory, invoked their, not her, but their title as president-elect of the Modern Language Association. James J. Marino, a professor at Cleveland State University and a member of the MLA, started a petition to demand Butler's resignation or removal from the post. He argued that, quote, protesting against one instance of punishment is only a means to the larger end of preserving senior faculty's privilege of impunity. Butler was standing up for an old, corrupt, and long-standing way of doing business. The time for doing business that way is over. We should never look back, unquote. Some 3 months later, Butler apologized to the MLA for the letter. Yes, and I believe that Slovenian philosopher intervened in this question, saying that her supposed Ronell's supposed sexual harassment, it was whimsical. Yes. Zizek argues that Ronell's conducts are acts of eccentricity, rather than sexual harassments. Eccentricity. So that's what they're calling it now. According to Wiki, Butler is a lesbian, legally non-binary, and goes by she or they pronouns. They live in Berkeley with their partner, Wendy Brown, and son, Isaac. There's an essay in Unheard by Gareth Roberts, which is called Judith Butler's Toxic Nonsense. Her mastery of claptrap would be hilarious if it weren't so dangerous. Judith Butler, the doyenne of what is known as theory, is back in the discourse thanks to a Guardian interview in which they, for it is they, not she, inevitably describe with unusual directness people who acknowledge that there are two sexes, i.e. 100% of humanity, as fascists. They is famous for writing thoughts on gender and culture which have all the light, straightforward readability of the user's manual for a nuclear reactor. They's prose make Dominic Cummings' blog look like A.A. Milne. And they is one of those soi-disant feminists who, rather surprisingly, claims to believe that women don't actually exist. They's most renowned sentence, which won the 1998 Bad Writing Competition in the journal Philosophy and Literature, runs as follows, quote, "The move from a structuralist account in which capital is understood to structure social relations in relatively homogeneous ways to a view of hegemony in which power relations are subject to repetition, convergence, and rearticulation brought the question of temporality into the thinking of structure and marked a shift from a form of Authoritarian theory that takes structural totalities as theoretical objects to one in which the insights into the contingent possibility of structure inaugurate a renewed conception of hegemony as bound up with the contingent sites and strategies of the rearticulation of power," unquote. Roberts comments, "It is a glorious racket and you can't help admiring it. I like to picture Judith as a snake oil purveyor on a traveling show in the days of the pioneering Wild West, sat in the wagon after the sell in a box coat and a tall hat, lighting a cigar with a $10 bill and having a good chuckle with the missus at the dumb rubes in the crowd. Honey pie, those bozos sucked it up." There's something very funny about seeing bourgeois idiots being taken for schmucks and grandly fleeced. Good for you, gal, you want to shout. If this were only a few bottles of liniment sold to a few stooges, it would have a roguish charm. With the explosion of higher education and of social media, these laughable ideas are increasingly seeping out into wider society. Judith is an undisputed master of the form, but such specious claptrap is a game anyone can play. Let's have a go. You take a social phenomenon or a piece of art, high or low, that doesn't matter, and subject it to theory. To pluck a random recent example, let's take current hit BBC drama Vigil. We might say that in its depiction of a female detective investigating a murder mystery on a submarine, that it posits interiority situationally as a partial détournement of the ideological power structures of the late capitalist ideations of guilt and innocence. Thanks to my university days, 30 long years ago now, but already riddled with this stuff, which goes back a lot longer than people think, I can spew this out. Once you've grasped the basics, it's easy. The difference is that back in 1992, when I'd completed my dissertation on gender norms in Carry On Loving and got my 2:1, I emerged into the real world with real people in it and didn't have to think about this trash again. Apart from as an amusing memory shared with fellow sufferers. No such luck for the graduate of 2021, who will find the mainstream media and the arts awash with theory jargon such as lived experience, intersectionality, and equity. Theory stems from the deconstruction popularized, if that's the word, in European academia in the middle of the last century, taking social conventions and art to bits to see how they work, which is something Aristotle was doing 2,000 years ago, to be fair. It can be very interesting to see how ideas operate, particularly in the then under-examined and comparatively new mass popular culture. The differences in taboos and hierarchies across cultures are fascinating. And abstract, unfamiliar concepts can obviously be hard to understand and convey. But critical theory tips buckets of nonsense over these reasonable, even banal foundations. It has no truck with the obvious reality of humans as evolved animals like any other. All of its observations stem from the false premise of the human being as a wholly nurtured blank slate, so everything that follows on is just plain wrong. It is like a series of whodunits where the murderer is the capitalist hegemony every time. It gulps down for its inspiration, art, beauty, and humanity and vomits them back up as pablum. The observations of early pioneers in linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure in particular, with his painstaking deliberations over the meanings of words across several languages and the way humans frame the world through language, became the baloney of saying that words actually physically change reality, so all you have to do is change words to change reality. Judith's new Guardian interview is a shiny example. Hocus pocus alakazam. Woman as a category is redefined to include blokes. The cabinet is thrown open and the lady has disappeared. So now we have queer theory, gender theory, critical race theory out in the open. And this stuff is dangerous when it metastasizes because it's not merely an irritant. It weakens and debilitates us. It amplifies neurosis and further damages already damaged people. The shouty unicorn avatar children of Twitter have been driven out of their tiny minds by it to their and our detriment. It has had a terrible deadening effect on the arts, reducing a lot of drama to nothing much more than grievance and resentment. The irony of this situation is that loopy ideas, so obviously contrary to sanity and reality as open borders, defund the police, or every human interaction being racist, could only have sprouted from the soil of liberal Western capitalist consumer societies. Theory is the most Western belief system imaginable. Picture an intellectual movement posturing against the central tenets of Chinese or Saudi Arabian society, embedded at the heart of the academic establishment in those countries, being funded by their people's disinterested governments nodding it through. You can't, because its exponents would be lucky to last the week. Deconstruction never deconstructs itself. If it ever looked in the mirror, it would see that it is old establishment down to its toenails, a ruling class progressive pose that belongs more to the 11th century than the 21st. It's surely no accident that the younger royalty is keen. It's as much a product of capitalism and about as left-wing as a packet of salt and vinegar crisps. It is, oh, irony of ironies, about strengthening existing class structures and power relations, its arcane lexicon and etiquette system. Objecting to it or breaking a taboo by saying, for example, that one tries not to see race or that there are two immutable sexes marks a person as low status. It is a mechanism for preserving inequalities, keeping people in their place, and making racial strife worse to enhance position and keep the cash rolling in. Its opponents on both left and right are far too squeamish. Detractors suggest that these bad ideas can be argued against and rejected. The excellent cynical theories by the estimable Helen Pluckrose et al. Makes this case immaculately. But you cannot argue with these fallacies and their perpetrators, as they grant no space to their opponents, who are, by their definition, oppressors, i.e. heretics. Theory cannot brook enlightened debate because it is pre-enlightenment, a feudal power grab. The only way to deal with it is to defund the academic institutions and courses that expound it. It must go. Or perhaps, as Judith might say, this whole article has been an attempt to reify hegemonic power structures resisting practice by codifying reified systems of meaning as normative. Who can possibly tell? You know, I had great fun with this word racialized, which just, 2 years ago, suddenly every CBC article had the word racialized in it. I'm barely exaggerating. But I was struck by what the author says here, the baloney of saying that words actually physically change reality. Okay. Let's look at Dr. Mina Salah, who objected to me asking her, who racialized you? Be specific. She flew into a rage, a profane rage, and then later accused me of not doing the reading. and of hiding my ignorance behind fancy words. Well, this is a Butlerian belief. We are racialized people. Oh, so you come up with this word racialized. So that means you are racialized. But what does that mean? It means that evil white people oppressed us. Oh, but no, how did they, did they change the color of your skin? Did they change your tribal affiliations? Did they change your position in the world? How exactly? We're racialized. Get it? You better get it, or you're going to be in big, big trouble. They treat, the theorists, they treat words as magic talisman. Paul Gottfried has an essay in American Greatness, Liberalism Isn't What It Used to Be. In a mystifying use of political labels, Andrew O'Hear, editor of Salon, offers this muddled view of the failure of liberalism. Liberalism, we are told, was until recently the dominant ideology in the West, and it was recognizable by these features: free trade and the primacy of the capitalist free market, the expansion of civil rights and civil liberties, freedom of the press and artistic expression, universal equality before the law, and a contested role for the state, which is sometimes highly interventionist and sometimes much more hands-off. But then this basket of principles suddenly fell apart as a crisis of democracy assumed serious proportions. This happened because liberalism, in that broader sense, is facing a challenge to which, according to O'Hear, it may well succumb. This fateful challenge has come in the form of Donald Trump, Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin, and others who are defying the liberal consensus that supposedly shaped American and most Western politics, at least since the end of World War II. All these leaders scorn the values of liberal societies and are stifling the worldview we once took for granted. To celebrate real liberal heroes, who are contrasted with today's anti-liberals, O'Hear shows us photos of FDR, JFK, and, lest we forget, this media-created titan, Barack Obama. As I already pointed out, O'Hear's references to liberalism are sometimes puzzling. Is it really Donald Trump, or is it the enforcers of political correctness, like the staff of Salon, who furnish the greater threat to our intellectual freedom? Did Trump or Orban try to inflict a collectivist economy on their countries? As someone who has read Salon, it seems to me that its contributors, far more than the members of O'Hear's rogues gallery, favor such a dirigiste economic arrangement. And isn't O'Hear trying to have it both ways when, after identifying liberalism with a free market economy, he includes among liberalism's defenders those who favor a highly interventionist state? In what sense are those who seek to impose on us a centralized public administration on the same liberal side as those who categorically reject that position? Gottfried continues, O'Hear's ignorance of the past is truly astonishing. The positions of his culturally leftist website hardly epitomize what liberals believed in the past. In my book, After Liberalism, I try to demonstrate how fundamentally our concepts of liberalism have changed since the 18th century. Unlike Salon, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Constant would not have included alphabet people rights as part of their liberal basket of principles, nor would such liberals in the 20th century sense as Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman have embraced Salon's notion of expressive rights. Most 19th century liberals whom I have studied did not believe that women should vote, and most had no moral problems with restricting immigration. Unlike Salon, however, they did believe that civil society should exist independently of the social engineering control of the modern administrative state. I would comment that, well, I've said before, liberalism is over, and the age of reason is over. It's the age of power now. I mean, naked seeking of power. I have the power, you don't, you do as I say. And there's no possible objection to this because we've already determined you to be an evil person. And, since we control the courts, we can get whatever results we like out of them. The behavior of the Biden administration, you remember Biden ran, he actually ran as a uniter. Oh, Trump was dividing America, he was going to unite America. Biden's administration has been easily the most divisive in American history. Come at me. Come at me, he said. with regard to the anti-vaxxers. He has pretty much defined everyone who voted for Donald Trump, and there were 75 million of them, something like that, as traitors. That's certainly not a very liberal view, but that is Biden's view, and it is the view of the so-called liberal elite. And this conundrum is considered in a piece by Josh Hammer in The American Mind called The Subjugation of the Deplorables. They know it's illegal, they just don't care. On June 27, 2019, the Supreme Court handed down its ruling in Department of Commerce versus New York, a case pertaining to the Trump-era Census Bureau's decision to ask census recipients if they were U.S. citizens. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, was one of the most tortured pieces of legal writing in decades. The court, playing the role of mind reader, flatly dismissed the Department of Commerce's cited reasons for including the citizenship questionnaire as pretextual. Justice Clarence Thomas, in dissent, aptly summed up what the Roberts-led majority had done, quote, "For the first time ever, the court invalidates an agency action solely because it questions the sincerity of the agency's otherwise adequate rationale," unquote. New York was an astonishing ruling, an unadulterated judicial power grab in the face of an executive agency issuing apropos rules quite clearly within its constitutional ambit. At the time, and in light of such a brazen attempt by the judicial branch to hijack the functions of the executive, some of us urged President Trump to pull a Lincoln, that is, refuse to obey the ruling except as it pertained to the named party, here, New York State, in the lawsuit. Unfortunately, Trump did not heed our advice. Fast forward 2 years later, and it appears President Biden is more interested than Trump was in defying the court as a procedural matter, despite the fact that, unlike Trump, he lacks any compelling justification whatsoever to do so. On June 29, 2021, in Alabama Association of Realtors versus Department of Health and Human Services, a divided court refused to nix the eviction moratorium issued during COVID by the Centers for Disease Control. The decisive vote came from the mercurial Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who said that although CDC exceeded its existing statutory authority with the emergency nationwide moratorium decree, he would vote at this time to deny the realtor plaintiff's application anyway because, well, reasons or politics or something else non-legal. Hand-waving accomplished, Kavanaugh concluded with a direct plea for Congress to get moving, quote, "Clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July 31st, unquote. July 31st came and Congress predictably did not act. Even more predictably, the Biden administration did not care. They opted instead to move full speed ahead and flip two large middle fingers at the court. American Mind managing editor Seth Barron summed it up well, quote, "President Biden, contravening his own insistence that he was powerless to act, simply told the CDC to impose a new moratorium, even though the Supreme Court has already indicated that it was illegal." This was not the action of a careful and prudential statesman seeking to preserve the integrity of the rule of law and channel the common good of the whole. It was the reckless, impetuous action of a career politician drunk on power. It was, as fate would have it, also a telling precursor to Biden's astonishing recent assault on Congress's plenary legislative prerogative. There, he unilaterally decreed that the Department of Labor somehow mandate nationwide vaccination or testing requirements for all employees of 100 or more persons. One could try in vain to pinpoint such an alleged presidential power in Article 2 of the constitutional text. It is not there. Elites to the rule of law drop dead. That is not pulling a Lincoln. Lincoln nobly defied an overzealous judiciary and narrowly recalibrated the constitutional balance of power to chasten it. What Biden did amounts to brazen, arrogant illegality, a crude will to power, masquerading under the guise of a faux compassion for tenants harmed by the largely self-inflicted COVID-era economic crash. The author goes on to talk, and this is Josh Hammer again, goes on to talk about government by perpetual crisis. Time's up, he says. Against this backdrop, the Deplorables' imperative fight back revolves around 4 core tenets. First, at a most basic level, understand what time it is in this late-stage republic. The oligarchs of our ruling class are not going away, and they have seized an enormous amount of control over what was once our robust system of government. The hour is very late. Second, and relatedly, reconceptualize our own side's approach to the rule of law. To borrow from David Azarad, we need to get comfortable wielding the levers of state power as our opponents do to reward friends and punish enemies. Third, use familiar litigation processes to strategically advance our causes when opportune moments to push back against COVID hysteria arise, and they will. One benefit of being in the political opposition is that we have no shortage of donor-funded, public interest, conservative litigation shops, such as the excellent Stephen Miller-led America First Legal. Reach out to them and cultivate their resources. Fourth, relocate as much as possible to safe red states such as Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, where the arm of the ruling class's Leviathan is less likely to pose an existential danger, and where active Republican attorneys general offices will sue the Democratic-held Leviathan on behalf of the Deplorables for the mere right to be left alone, and do so post-haste. The COVID era has revealed the extent to which our elites no longer even deign to care about a neutral rule of law that respects and protects all our fellow countrymen. We Deplorables no longer have any time to waste in pushing back against their excesses. So survey the landscape, stop clinging to vestigial notions of a bygone nonpartisan legal neutrality, strategically sue to protect our most basic rights, and get off your butt and move to red states. If not now, then what are you possibly waiting for? And Josh Hammer has written this at the American Mind at americanmind.org, and it's called The Subjugation of the Deplorables. Let's go to the chat. Texas Feral Hog said Lincoln had to if he was going to keep the Union together. Not so sure Lincoln didn't assume dictatorial powers. He certainly did. He certainly did. He attempted to have the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court arrested, Roger Taney. He declared martial law. He seized cities, arrested journalists. Yes. No habeas corpus, you know. I don't know. I grew up under a conservative movement that largely, I say with the exception of Harry Jaffa, regarded Abraham Lincoln as one of the greatest villains in American history. But no, everyone now is obliged to worship Lincoln, it seems. He was a railroad lawyer, this man of the people, supposedly a railroad lawyer. Okay. What else do we have here? Hello to Deplorables, who says, I can't live in Asia longer than 1 week cabin fever, LOL. James Monroe's Western Hemisphere seems tough all over, says Quachalango. Who did KMG's artwork? I can't remember, and I feel ashamed about this. I know the fellow sent it to me. It must have been last year, because it comes from, you know, what the setup looked like when I was broadcasting from my late father's condo. I wish he'd get in touch with me so I could praise him for his work. He was disappointed. He was put out with me because I didn't replace my Twitter avatar with that portrait. But as I say, I wish that he would get in touch with me. Obviously, the Israelis racialize the Palestinians, but she will not say that, says Chokin 666. Lived experience. Oh, yes, your lived experience. You're one of the precious few that actually has lived experience. Unlike every other person in the history of humanity, you are one of the elect who can speak of her or his or they's lived experience. It's just too, it's too funny. Quachalango says, KMG, please nominate your biographer while there is time. I don't even think I'll get much in the way of obituaries when I die. I'm not complaining, mind you. Now Gamillion and I want to know what you have against Nick Cave, says Quetzalcoatl. Oh, I don't know where that came from. Okay. Let's get back to it here. Oh yes, General Milley again. Yes. Yes, the progressives the Biden supporters are very much against tyranny. This is from Jeff Poor at Breitbart. Tucker Carlson on his show said we almost never use the term deep state on this show. There is something about it that sounds paranoid, even a little nutty. It's just a few years ago, you probably mostly heard this phrase from relics on the far left, the kind of people who lecture you about the United Fruit Company and the toppling of Mossadegh. That would be in Iran. The term then and now suggests that our democracy is fake. Elections and domestic politics are just a sideshow. No matter who you vote for, in the end, the same people still run everything. That's a pretty dark understanding of the American system. If you're a normal person who grew up here, it is the last thing you want to believe about your own country. It seems crazy. And then you read stories like this one. According to reporting this summer, in the last days after November's election, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, held a meeting with senior military officials at the Pentagon. Milley wanted to inform them of what he described as a serious threat to national security, a threat so grave that it imperiled, quote, the stability of the republic. That threat, Milley said, was the sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump, that dared to question the election results. For this, Milley explained, the U.S. military might be required to use physical force against the president. We're the guys with guns, Milley said. Apparently, he'd been preparing for this moment. Milley had similar conversations with the director of the CIA, Gina Haspel, as well as with the head of the NSA, Paul Nakasone. He had also spoken directly to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump's chief political rivals. Now, according to a new book by Bob Woodward and Bob Costa, Milley apparently went even further than that. On October 30th of last year, Woodward and Costa report, Milley called his counterpart in China. That's a general called Li Zhuocheng. Milley did not tell his boss, the president, about this call either before he made it or after. Here was Milley's message for the Chinese military, quote, General Li, I want to assure you that the American government is stable and everything is going to be okay. We are not going to attack or conduct any kinetic operations against you. And then reportedly, Milley said this, quote, General Li, you and I have known each other for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise, unquote. Let that sink in. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. So according to this account, our country's top defense officials secretly colluded with our chief military rival to undercut the elected president of the United States. How would you describe that? Deep state is not strong enough. This is treason. That's a crime. And apparently Mark Milley is not the only person who was implicated in this crime. Others knew it was happening as it did. Our intelligence agencies almost certainly heard Mark Milley's call. If they can read emails from a cable news show on Fox, what are the chances they were aware that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was speaking to a senior Chinese general and what they were saying? Well, a chance of about 100%. And yet the NSA did nothing about it. The CIA, meanwhile, was clearly fully on board with this. We are on the way to a right-wing coup, said Gina Haspel. She told Milley that. And in fact, there was a coup in progress, but it didn't come from the right. It wasn't brewing in Alabama. Instead, a constellation of unelected government employees, loyal above all to the Democratic Party and to the permanent class in Washington, ignored the United States Constitution and that they invalidated the votes of tens of millions of American citizens. How did they do that? Because they invalidated democracy. Democracy doesn't mean anything if the people you elect have no power, and Mark Milley did his best to make certain the elected president had no power. In early January, Woodward and Costa report, Milley called another meeting of senior officials at the National Military Command Center. He informed this group that they reported to him, not to the elected president of the United States, and that's not a small claim. The National Military Command Center controls, among other things, the nuclear weapons inside our missile silos, as well as the nuclear weapons on board our submarines. So Mark Milley was seizing personal control of America's nuclear arsenal. He went around the room and demanded that his officers submit to his authority, not the president's. Milley told them to follow no orders without first consulting him. According to Woodward and Costa, all present in the room agreed to this, so civilian control of the military was over. Mark Milley was in charge. If this is true, it is one of the scariest things that has ever happened in this country. You often hear people say that they're worried about authoritarianism coming to America. Well, it's here. That's what this is. It's authoritarian government. It is governed by unelected, unaccountable leaders who are willing to use violence to preserve their power. That's what this book describes. It's shocking. Oh, what does George Will have to say about this? I think Milley felt ill-used by the episode in Lafayette Square when he was used as a prop, so one could understand Milley's anxieties. Oh, but you get to be a, 4-star, 5-star general while having such a thin skin? You know, I do not like to entertain conspiracy theories as a rule. But given what we've seen from the Biden administration, I was just thinking that the publication of this book might have had a specific purpose. This news is, it's out there, and more people are going to find out about it. And a great many people are going to be absolutely infuriated by this. And a fair number of the people who are going to be infuriated by this have guns. And or military training, and they are looking for a provocation. They are looking for a Reichstag fire incident in order to eliminate political opposition in the United States of America. I mean, if they can get away with this, if Milley can get away with this, if Milley is not sanctioned, if he's not fired, if he's not court-martialed, and Barry McCaffrey, retired U.S. Army officer, says we're in a period of extraordinary danger. I think General Milley is going to be treated very favorably by history. I don't know. Do they want Woodward and Costa, the regime media? Do they want Americans to start hating the military? Because that might be one of the results of this extraordinary situation. And let's see. Okay. Mark Milley told military officials not to take orders after Capitol riot. Okay. Tony Blinken confirms child brides evacuated with older men from Afghanistan. I think I'll talk about Satan being real tomorrow. I was listening to the Louvain Brothers record of that name last night. But I wanted to talk about Kanye West. Is it Kanye West? And what is it that this guy does exactly? That's a serious question. And I've wondered about this for quite some years. But I was thinking about it again today when I was referred to an article on the site ultimateclassicrock.com. And it's about Todd Rundgren, the famous singer, songwriter, guitarist, producer, and his involvement with Kanye West. Kanye West's 10th album, Donda, was released in late August and celebrated with extravagant listening parties at Chicago's Soldier Field and Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The record features a range of guests from Jay-Z to Marilyn Manson. But one person you won't find on there is Todd Rundgren, who was asked to participate, but apparently didn't make the final cut. I'm one of the few artists not on Kanye's album, Rundgren said. He says he even went out of his way to make himself available for sessions. I have 3 albums worth of Kanye stems on my computer because I kept getting called by Kanye to add vocals onto the record. When it got into the home stretch in July, I just said, that's enough for me. I have no idea whether any of this is being used. You don't get much feedback from him regarding what it is. Rundgren was enlisted by producer 88 Keys, who Rundgren calls a terrific guy. He's a big fan of mine and wanted to see us work together. No matter the subject matter, he was happy to participate. I didn't mind working on his gospel stuff. If you want to sing about Jesus, go ahead. I don't care. I'll help you do it, If If you want to sing about your troubles with your wife, go ahead and do it. I don't care. Still, Rundgren gets weary recalling how he reached a breaking point. I'm still a producer, and I just don't want to be like driftwood in the process. If I can contribute something, fine. If I can't, just let me know. I'm out of here. Yet he doesn't know for sure if maybe some of his contributions are buried in the final mixes. There's a possibility I'm actually in there somewhere. There's so much junk in that record. Rundgren says he eventually came to the realization that West is a shoe designer. He's just a dilettante at this point. Nobody would regularly make records like that unless they had stupid money to throw around. Nobody rents a stadium to make a record in. Nobody flies in the entire world of hip-hop just to croak one syllable, just so you can say that everybody was on it. My involvement, Rundgren continues, went on for a year, and in the end, I realized why they hurriedly wrapped the whole thing up and put out what is obviously really raw, unprocessed stuff. It's because Drake was running the whole process. He was too afraid that Drake would one-up him, so he hurried up and released the album the weekend before Drake could get his out, and in the end, Drake ate his lunch anyway. Rundgren will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame next month. He'll launch the Individualist A True Star tour in October to playing album sides from his classic 1973 record, A Wizard and True Star, as well as a rotating selection of fan favorites from throughout his career. Now, I'm trying to remember which Kanye record it was. I think it could have been Life of Pablo, where this was going to be the greatest ever record, perhaps the greatest ever artistic achievement in mankind's history. Oh, and he'd been working on it in Paris, and he'd been working on it everywhere. Oh, God knows how long. And then, from what I understand, the tapes, the digital records, just got dumped to Rick Rubin. Here, you do something with this, because Kanye is never obviously going to finish this record. And I started thinking about that. I was reminded again that Rick Rubin is, he's the man who invented hip hop. He's a white guy, a white Jewish guy. He invented hip hop. Rick Rubin is a very talented man, no question about it. But no, this album is such a mess. Let's just hand it over to Rick Rubin, and I'm sure he can salvage something. And I'm just wondering, how much involvement does Kanye West actually have in his records? He can't really sing. He can't really rap. He doesn't play any instruments that I know of. He's certainly not an arranger. Exactly what is it that he does? Is he the one that finds those rare samples from 1970s record, like his use of a can track from Edge of Bamyazi? No, I don't think so. I think he has employees that do that. But I don't know, going back to the beginning of the Kanye story, he's just the greatest. He is a black superstar. He is the superstar of the music industry, and everyone must agree. And when it became, obvious with his rants on stage and marrying Kim Kardashian and then endorsing Trump and then unendorsing him and running for president, that he is crazy as a loon. The sunk cost fallacy. The record critics weren't going to say, particularly, white ones at Pitchfork or whatever, can say, yeah, boy, we really got taken for a ride with this Kanye West. Oh, man. So everyone, it's true what Todd Rundgren says. Everyone is on this record. Everyone is on this record. That every rapper that there is, apparently, perhaps because, again, Kanye West can't rap. So who are the producers on this record? Kanye West, 30 Rock, 88 Keys, All Day, Arrow Sunday, AOAA, Boy Wonder, Boogs the Beast, Q Beats, Digital Nas, DJ Khalil, Dirtwork, Evax, Geseffelstein, I'm not making that up, Jeff Basker, Louis Bell, Mike Dean, Arj Volto, Ronnie J, Swizz Beats, TT Audi, and Warren Campbell. Golly, that is an awful lot of producers. Wouldn't you say? How can one create anything which could be considered, organic in any way when, I don't know, let's look at a song called Hurricane, which is on Donda. It features vocals from Canadian singer The Weeknd and American rapper Lil Baby. All right. So Hurricane is written by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different producers. This is some sort of magnum opus we're talking about here, right? It lasts 4 minutes and 3 seconds. It has been suggested by several people that, rap music, hip hop, it's a money laundering scheme. When you look at the amount of time that this record took to make, again, as Todd Rundgren says, who makes records in a stadium? No, you don't. You don't do that. You don't do that. So all of these different producers, and Marilyn Manson and Lil Baby, and West Side Gun and Conway the Machine and DeJuan Parker and everybody else. Young Thug, Ty Dolla $ign, Big Sean, 6ix9ine, Casey, Aunt Clemens. They're getting paid. The Baby, 2 Chainz. They're all getting paid. All these producers are getting paid. Everybody who shows up is getting paid. Like, how many millions of copies was this record need to sell just to break even? Just to break even. But of course, the critics, they did their job, which was to drool about how wonderful Kanye West is. I mean, you know the expression, the kitchen sink? Kitchen sink productions are generally looked down upon. The failure of imagination, a failure of vision. But no, for the most part, the critics are behind the magazine, although Pitchfork gave it only 6 out of 10. Let's see, Johnny Coleman, writing for The Hollywood Reporter, gave the album a negative review, calling it a slog. He elaborated, "It's hard to imagine what this record is supposed to be the soundtrack for. It's not a party record. It doesn't invite introspection. It's not spiritual outside of literal references. It's not really a radio record. It's disposable and forgettable, like so much of the culture spat down to us during COVID." In particular, Coleman felt the album lacked thematic coherence and reverence for West's mother, Donda, viewing the album as self-indulgent. On the other hand, Paul Thompson of Rolling Stone, while commenting that Donda is more considered and musically coherent than anything West has made in the past half-decade, considered the album to be uneven and overlong with a radically superior second half. Yes, the album is 109 minutes long. Perhaps Kanye West could have decided to make it a serviceable 40 minutes, say, and then he wouldn't have had to deliver, raw, unproduced, unedited tapes to the record company. No, but Kanye West is a megalomaniac, and he has been indulged by the intellectual elite of the world. I mean, it's their fault that this guy just gets crazier and crazier. Let's take a final look at the chat. Oscar Toe says, "I thought Kanye was a super genius and didn't need any help with his great talent." Talent for what? Exactly. Visionary Companion says, "I sometimes have Rip Van Winkle seizures in which I see the world of pop culture as if I had just awoken from a 40-year coma and I'm suddenly surrounded by grunting cretins saying, yo." Siri, what do I think about a guy who says, what's this? Fabulous? I don't know what that is. Conti Roulette says, "Check out Sam Hyde's new rap song, Anthony Fantano diss on Hyde Wars channel. His rap dancing is brutally funny. Is that rapper really a Lil Baby? Dan asks. That's Gamion. Dan asks, is Lilibet featured on the album as well? Old school people will know I saved Ultra Testosterone from being kicked off the Luke Ford shows. Okay, all right. Seven Costanza says, I still want an album of KMG reading rap lyrics. The Right Honorable says Trump had always praised the generals in his campaign, then they turned on him. I don't know. I'm just thinking, when appointing aides, cabinet officers, generals, maybe a lie detector should be used, Voice analysis. Truth drugs, because these people will apparently lie. They will lie in order to work for a man who they have no respect for, who they hate, and are determined to stymie at every instance. Visionary Companion says, I wish I could honestly say I'd never heard of Kanye West, but I have heard of him, and I'm diminished by such familiarity. When Kanye did, his version of this Can song from their brilliant record, Egabamyazi, what he did was he took the song. It's a waltz. It's called Sing Swan Song. And it's strange and mysterious and sinister. And he just left the music alone, pretty much, and then just improvised some stupid things about drunk girls over it. Admittedly, the lyrics by Damo Suzuki are in an unknown language, sort of half English, half Japanese, and some private language of Suzuki's. But, do your own song, Kanye West. But he's not capable. He's just not capable of it. Kanye is like, let's get Shakespeare, Goethe, Dante, Stephen King, and Dick Wolf together and create the greatest movie of all time. That's Oscar Toe. Yeah, I quite like that. I quite like that. Of course, Kanye is literally a shoe designer. You just look them up. Do an image search for Kanye West and shoes. And to quote O.J. Simpson, they are ugly ass shoes. Okay, time to wrap it up. Tomorrow is Theater Thursday, and I have a very fun movie to talk about tomorrow from 1997, directed by Paul Verhoeven, Starship Troopers. As previously mentioned, I'm going to be talking about Robert Edgerton's Six Societies on the Book Club on Friday. And on Music Monday, on September 20th, I'm going to be talking about trip hop. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done already. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which I could, to be honest, desperately use right now, because I've got 9 days to go before a hard deadline for the next month's rent, which I do not have. As I say, if you'd like to make a donation, my PayPal account is attached to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made directly via Interact to kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, managed to forge a genuine human connection to ease the burden. Good night.